Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to this new episode of EPC Talks Geopolitics. Today's guest is exceptional, not only because of her incredibly accomplished career, but also because her success is an inspiration for other women out there seeking to break through the glass ceiling and make a difference through their work. She is currently the Minister of Defense of North Macedonia, but has previously held many high-level positions, including Deputy Prime Minister for European Integration, Prime Minister and leader of the Social Democratic Union of Macedonia. And if I'm not mistaken, she was the first lady in her country to serve in these roles. Radmila Šekerinska, I won't even attempt to do justice to your impressive resume. Welcome. And thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Now, the goal of Euro-Atlantic integration has been a strategic priority for North Macedonia and a project that has ebbed and flowed for almost 2 decades now. Last year, after a long time, things seem to be looking up for your country on this journey, when the EU capitals finally gave North Macedonia the green light for the start of accession talks, and NATO welcomed it as the 30th member. Since then, we went through a global pandemic that has upended society in unbelievable ways from many points of view. I suggest that the two of us first try to take stock of these events and also to look ahead at some potential developments in the future before we hear what comments and questions our participants have for you. So if you agree with this plan, then I suggest we delve straight in and start from your country's now already 1-year experience as a NATO member. Has NATO accession proved to be everything you have expected? What kind of benefits are you seeing or looking to derive from being part of this military alliance?
Well, thank you, Corina, very much. And thank you for inviting me to discuss about the big picture. Because, you know, when you're a minister in the government, you start focusing so much on details that you undermine the big picture. But our goal to join NATO was part of our desire to look at the big picture and adjust our sails, because this is what small countries need to do. They need to analyze the world, they need to understand the world, and they need to adjust their decisions based on how they see geopolitics and how they see their place in this. I very often ask myself, after 30 years of independence, and after 30 years after the breakdown of Yugoslavia, should we be optimists or pessimists? And this is a very rhetorical question, because if you want to engage in doing politics on a daily basis, it's a question of mental choice. You have to be an optimist to keep going. So in a way, I have always opted for this, but in a way, I have mixed feelings about the 30 years. On one side, this is a completely different place. When I compare the situation today, not only in North Macedonia, but throughout the region, and I compare it to my first attempt of exercising democratic rights, which was the referendum for independence back in the beginning of the 90s. You know, we have been, most of the countries were at war with each other or within. We have gone through difficult ethnic conflicts. We have gone through a major political crisis. So there is a reason to be optimistic and to say we have come a long way. But in the same time, when you analyze the deep-rooted problems of our societies, you will see that there are still similarities that have reference to the difficult ethnic composition of the countries, the still difficult struggles on the core democratic values, the lack of institutional strength that will oppose autocratic tendencies, etc., etc. So in choosing to be still an optimist for the Balkans, and especially for my country, NATO membership was an important part of that goal. And this was one of the really few uniting goals for North Macedonia. In the beginning of the 90s, when we discovered that politics is about diversity, also about different political views, we went into the other extreme. Practically whatever the government would propose would be seen as an attack by the opposition. And when the roles changed, even the position changed. But membership into NATO and in the European Union was always seen as a uniting point. So our goal to get into NATO had a lot to do, of course, with global and collective security, with the fact that we are small countries and therefore can only gain strength and can gain security if belonging to something bigger. With all the weaknesses, with all the critical moments in the history of NATO, this is still very much the most successful military and political alliance in the history of mankind. So being part of this was in a way, an honor of a badge of honor for small countries, that you have done better, that you have done well, that you have done something. But it also was important because along the process, the countries had the opportunity to improve itself. If you analyze our security challenges throughout the region, you will see today that most of these challenges have to do with internal weaknesses. I am a Minister of Defense, and I'm a Minister of Defense now of a NATO member state, but I'm not naive to believe that NATO is a panacea for all our weaknesses. It's not a silver bullet for all the security challenges, but it was an instrument to improve our system. It was an instrument to deal with some of the deep-rooted domestic weaknesses. And it is also a good exercise for small, independent, recently independent nations to exercise building alliances, finding compromises, and solving problems. Maybe the biggest advantage that NATO membership brought to us was that it pushed us into making difficult compromises with some of our neighbors. It is a bit counterintuitive, maybe, you know, because all of these compromises bore a huge political cost. But deep down, they have improved our relationship with neighbors, and they have really created a self of confidence within the nation that we can achieve something of our own. So the moment when we joined NATO was one of the few moments of national victory. And I think we need to cherish them because they are an important part of growing up.
Thank you so much, Minister. And would you say that the public also sees it that way? So do you think that the public sees your country's NATO membership as a positive thing, or maybe less so?
Of course, I wouldn't say that the public would consider the difficult political compromises as the added value of NATO. No, actually, they did consider this the counter arguments against NATO. But even when confronted with these difficult choices, the majority of citizens actually residing and depending on the existence of and the well-being of our country opted for accepting the difficult compromise in order to move forward. I can use two numbers, let's say, to say that the public has been supportive and is still supportive to our NATO membership. The first one is easy. It comes from the report of the Secretary General of NATO, where practically all countries were assessed on the public opinion support to NATO membership. And North Macedonia is one of the countries that can say that it has one of the highest support rates within NATO member states on NATO membership. 70% of the citizens support the membership and see it as important and beneficial to our stability and prosperity. But there is also actually one, I would say, more interesting and I would say more important element. We have been elected for the first time in 2016 as a government. Actually, the government was elected in 2017, and we engaged in very difficult reform on the democratic front, on defense, media, basic, not to mention the economy. most of these decisions were not fully popular, especially not our shift in relationships towards Greece and Bulgaria. I always say that there was a so-called Bermuda Triangle in Macedonian politics since its our independence. It was a Bermuda Triangle of three very difficult, very controversial issues: our relationship with Greece, our relationship with Bulgaria, and our internal inter-ethnic relationship between predominantly ethnic Macedonians and ethnic Albanians. And there was this story that if you're a government who wants to deal with one of them, you're doomed. So you might succeed, but you will eventually lose on next election. Well, I think that this government has proven this conventional wisdom completely wrong, because we did not deal with one of these issues. We dealt with three of the issues, and we have survived politically, not barely, because in the meantime, we have won both presidential and parliamentary elections. Having this government who dealt with these three difficult issues re-elected was a testament to the fact that although compromises are painful and people object to them and they dislike them because many of them touched very deep core of majority of our citizens, they want to move forward. They want to move on, and they want to see the country at a better place.
Absolutely. Indeed, your government was very courageous and demonstrated a lot of maturity when it finally managed to solve the name dispute issue with Greece through a historic agreement. But we do know that, of course, that that the Bulgarian aspect of the triangle remains is still pending to a large extent, and it's actually continuing to block your country's ability to advance on the EU track. Would you say that history is repeating itself, and do you see a way out of this dilemma?
You know, it's like, again, it's like the Bermuda Triangle. It hasn't disappeared. It's just that we have found ways to avoid the dangers, but the risks remain. Probably for North Macedonia now, these three issues will continue to influence our prosperity and our political developments. I will address immediately the issue of Bulgaria, but let me tell you, Prespa agreement has been signed. It is being implemented. No one should be naive to expect that there won't be hiccups. The thing that could trigger these are if at least one of the two governments is irresponsible with regards to the implementation. So it's there. It shouldn't be underestimated. Inter-ethnic relations will always have an influence on North Macedonia's not stability, but the political weight and the political prosperity, because issues like this, they're not static. They do not require one-time political decisions. They're work in progress. And this is not true only for North Macedonia. This is true now for each and every modern society, which has diversity elements. And we are seeing it throughout Europe. With Bulgaria, actually, the expectation, not the expectation, the assessment that we have made with regards to the last 4 years was that the first success of signing the friendship treaty with Bulgaria gave Macedonian politicians the courage and the hope that even the problem with Greece is not completely unsurmountable. It inspired us to think big and to not lower the bar of expectation. We know that these kinds of decisions are a difficult journey. And like with all difficult journeys, that they require both character and courage. The character is needed because the difficult issues are not obvious. I mean, now Prespa agreement looks rather successful. But if you have asked most of us just a few years before it was signed, is this feasible? Most of us would have said no. It was a combination of character and courage to take the risk and to travel this lonely road. And then many have joined afterwards. With Bulgaria, I think the situation is slightly more complicated now, because with Greece, we have had a frozen conflict. Everyone got used to the conflict, so it was difficult to shake the status quo. With Bulgaria, we knew that there will be issues that we will discuss. We have had two commissions, one dealing with historical issues. Most of the European countries had such commissions, especially after the Second World War. It's not something that happens overnight. It's not something that requires just a political courage. It requires also a lot of work on behalf of historians, on behalf of the societies, etc. The problem was that everyone, including most of our European colleagues, were shocked that any kind of slowdown or any kind of dilemma with this process could provoke yet another veto. Of course, if we talk now diplomatically, Bulgarian representatives will say, no, it was not a veto, but de facto it was the similar veto like the Greek one in 2008. And there is, I'm afraid for the first time, a strong disappointment mood within the most pro-European forces in North Macedonia. People in North Macedonia always had walked a thin line between depression and optimism. And some structures within our societies are generally saying that we shouldn't expect anything from the European Union. They have abandoned us. But this is a small fragment. A strong majority of our society is pro-European. And the most vocal voices within this pro-European structure have lost hope. Because what happens now with Bulgaria is actually the biggest blow to the Prespa agreement since its signing. The key elements in the Prespa agreement was that the implementation will follow our NATO and EU accession. For example, most of the responsibilities with regards to using North Macedonia in all our documents are connected with accession chapters. Without opening the chapters or now opening the clusters, this will give a pretext or an excuse for any government or institution to delay this. So I firmly believe that if with the appropriate political will, there can be a breakthrough. In June or in September. We have entered the cycle of elections, and this is actually making our work very difficult because the first attempt in Bulgaria was unsuccessful. They're heading towards elections. The question that we ask ourselves constantly is there a hope? Should we invest our resources in negotiating with a technical government? We took a leap of hope. So we are continuing our discussions, our negotiations. We have appreciated very much the proposals coming from the Portuguese presidency. Many people believe that the Portuguese presidency will not be overly enthusiastic nor overly interested in this faraway region in a way. But actually they have been very skillful in looking at the different challenges for North Macedonia and Bulgaria and the different fears that we have. So if there is a political will, there will be a political way to solve this problem. But I think it is a major blow to the reliability of all the European forces, both within the EU and within the region and to the EU itself. As they say, reliability is actually, in today's world, more important than, I don't know, tactical cleverness. I think that was the comparison I've read somewhere. Because if you cannot rely on the words, the promises, the expectations that were co-created, then there is no predictability anywhere. Usually the Balkans was famous for being unpredictable and unreliable. But this time we both have to prove that the European promise was not just words.
Absolutely. But are you ready for a scenario in which that doesn't happen? I mean, do you think that this political will and hard work that is still necessary and that you expect, in fact, you don't shy away from it, do you think that those are will be possible to maintain if the European counterparts don't keep to their end of the bargain? And in particular, you mentioned how surprised and I think you used the word shocked some of the EU partners were at the reaction of Bulgaria. Do you think that maybe the EU and its member states should help more in persuading Bulgaria to change its position?
I do believe that at the end, when I really think it's a question of when, not if, there will be a decision. But in the meantime, the situation will not stand still. When we have signed Prespa agreement, when we have analyzed the situation, we have seen that a compromise on this issue would have been easier back in 2008, probably for both countries. And in the meantime, we would have had 10 years to work on bilateral economic, political contacts and increase our work on joint interests. So you do not enter the river on the same place twice, right? And I'm really afraid and concerned that when this happens, the situation will be more difficult for both Bulgaria and North Macedonia and the European Union than a few years ago. This was one of the messages that we have sent 2 years ago when EU was initially hesitant on starting accession talks because of some resistance in France, in Denmark to a certain extent, Netherlands, especially vis-a-vis Albania. And actually, I don't say that we are the oracle, but it wasn't difficult to expect that there could be a new surprise afterwards. So we said, okay, 6 months will not hurt anyone in the region. So a delay of 6 months will not change our resolution to deliver on domestic reforms. But something else might might come in. A new political dynamism in Bulgaria could happen. And, we have predicted this potential danger. I do believe that some of our colleagues in the European Union underestimated the danger. And because we were following Bulgarian media, we knew that, if you raise the rhetoric before the elections, it doesn't disappear during the election. So even if you want to go back, practically you are impeded by your own words. At the end of the day, when this happens, when there is a solution, it will be a solution of our government and the Bulgarian government. I do believe that European partners can help. And I do believe that I'm very careful about these words, they have a responsibility. I do believe that it's first and foremost us that have the responsibility towards our citizens and our country. But Europe has paid a huge price in the past when they have neglected the danger in the Western Balkans. One way or the other. I'm not talking about First World War or the Second World War, because it is part of the continent, because it influences, because it's so intertwined with the continent that practically what happens here is a certain kind of a preview, a trailer of what could happen next, very much within the European Union. And what I fear the most because of these delays is that the rhetoric within the Balkan politicians will change. And we hear it in countries, not in North Macedonia only, but in countries around. look at North Macedonia. They have done everything. They have made the difficult political choices. And it's not just Prespa. And it's not just the agreement with Bulgaria. And it's not just the interethnic relations between Macedonians and Albanians. It's also a thorough democratic reform in which media are again free. Autocratic tendencies are gone. Transparency has been assessed as the most positive in the region. So it's like this is the going along the book of what needs to happen. A change in the rule of law, change in the judiciary. So this overwhelming reform package has happened, and there is absolutely no delivery from the EU side. And this is used by a certain number of politicians throughout the Balkans as an example that these promises and these words should not be trusted. And when people stop believing in something, then they stop working towards it. These reforms are necessary first and foremost for us. But you know, if you don't have the guiding star, and EU has been a guiding star for many citizens, then you start doubting your decisions. You start procrastinating some of these difficult political choices, and then something happens. So I don't think that we should create vulnerabilities, weaknesses, and divides within our societies that we have spent decades working to heal.
Absolutely. Those are real risks. And as you say, EU's credibility is at stake. And the EU is playing a little bit with fire in this respect. And because you mentioned Albania, maybe a last question on this subject. You mentioned Albania and also how quickly things can change. And we've heard recently, even from Commissioner Farheli, the possibility that maybe a decoupling of North Macedonia and Albania will occur so as to allow Albania to advance. How would you react to such a possibility, to such a scenario?
Well, I'll go back to credibility. 2 years ago, 1 year ago, the decision not to start accession talks with North Macedonia happened because of doubts with regards to Albania. And the EU position was that it is good for the process that two countries move forward together. You know, you will find rational and academic and political arguments both ways. But I think that the key issue is to move forward. And I think Albania also made strides. They have made adjustments. I think it's important not only to reward them, but to put additional burden on the shoulders of the politicians in North Macedonia and Albania to perform better. And this happens only during accession talks. Years ago, we have done a very in-depth analysis on what has happened in the countries of Central and Eastern Europe during their accession process. And if you analyze the difficult reforms, you will see that, of course, they did some work in the beginning prior to the start of the accession talks. But the most meaningful, the most sustainable change occurred during the accession process. First, because conditions were attached. Secondly, because there was a huge magnifying mirror for every political elite to deliver, really. And thirdly, because also there was more money available. So without the same kind of constructive, virtuous cycle, I think it will be very, very difficult to jumpstart the process again, because the EU enlargement is in crisis, not only because of Albania and North Macedonia. It is generally seen as stalling, as, you know, buying time. And this is a problem. And in a vacuum like this, we see the rebirth of old ideas. You know, the non-paper that was presented by first regional media and then by even some European media, is exactly this: using strategic weaknesses of the EU and the Balkans to add additional element of fear and concern. Because when people are afraid, then they do stupid things. When people lose confidence, then they start accepting populist ideas, then they start seeing autocratic tendencies as being in control, and then they start seeing everyone else as their enemies. This was the recipe for disaster in the Balkans and in Europe for centuries. When we were asked to comment on, you know, this newly created idea, newly reborn idea that, you know, just redrawing the maps and you will solve the problem of the Balkans. Actually, I quoted an old document, I don't know, in the 19th century, produced by the Austrian Foreign Ministry, who claimed that the recipe to solve the problems in the Balkans with just a new ethnic boundary is a recipe for chaos and a recipe for violence. And it's a never-ending story. So the vacuum opened the door for scenarios like this.
Absolutely. And of course, there are consequences not just for North Macedonia, but for the region as a whole. So if we take a more regional look now, beyond this quite important risk that we've spoken about, what other urgent dangers do you see that could destabilize the region? And also, what role do you see external powers such as, well, US, China, Russia playing in these dynamics? This is my last question before I will open the floor to our participants. So I already encourage everyone in our audience to prepare their comments and queries if they have any for the minister.
It is difficult to discuss existential threats. But there are at least two other threats that undermine the prosperity of this region. One of them is the demographic decline, the loss of almost a generation of young, educated, open-minded people who have seized the opportunity of a more open market and interest for their capability and left. I think that we will recover from this loss in the next decades, and we will face difficulties. And the second, of course, is the double threat of economic and environmental challenges, especially because the EU has managed to increase its ambition with the recovery plans, a bit provoked by the crisis. And I think it was an excellent display of how EU can be at its best dealing with the crisis, with the worst crisis. And maybe that the crisis gives us an element of urgency, which probably we need when it comes to environment, especially. I don't see that urgency visible in the Balkans because we are so preoccupied and pressured by the momentary economic challenges. It is difficult to think in terms of next few decades. But I see this change happening in all of the countries in Western Balkans. I do see the emergence of citizens, groups, political parties that are now turning the attention towards quality of life, not just basic necessities, but really quality, including the environment. And I think that it will be key for all of us to increase the pace of European accession, also in order to include these new challenges. But when it comes to something more pressing, more existential, I think it's the same like most of the European Union and the Western, let's say, world. Our weakness towards disinformation campaigns, our weakness with regards to different types of hybrid threats, I think it's becoming really a huge minus for not so much the state, but the societies. And I think that we are becoming increasingly weak because of this. The combination of disinformation campaign and social media are toxic. And we have seen that they have been used also during the PRESPA agreement negotiations, during the implementation of the PRESPA agreement, during all of our elections. And I think it's not something that was visible only in the Western Balkans, but in a way we were the introduction of what happens next. And I do see them as the new security challenges with which we cannot fight with the usual security instruments. And this is a work in progress, both within NATO and within North Macedonia. With regards to geopolitics and the role, the influence of the global players, I think that many people have falsely assumed that geopolitics has left. I think it was just a short period of us believing that it has left. And I'm talking predominantly about the Balkans, but actually it goes without saying in a much wider context. And we have seen, especially in the last, well, I would say 10 years, we have seen a significant shift in the whole region, with US being a bit less visible and less active, with the plan of delivering this responsibility more to the EU. And then in the last 5-6 years, we have seen two different but complementary patterns from Russia and from China. China being fully focused on economic infrastructure cooperation, giving out loans which we cannot get elsewhere. So in a way, sometimes making offers that you cannot resist, you cannot say no to. But what was very interesting, and I think that North Macedonia is a typical example, is this re-emergence of Russia. This is probably not true in all small countries, but in small countries in transition like North Macedonia, it's very interesting that in the last 30 years, the name of the EU or the US ambassador was a household name. Kids would know who they are. People would approach them on the streets. They would be seen as the top news during the day, which was, of course, maybe a negative extreme on one side. And it spoke volumes of how people perceived the West, EU, US as the source of confidence. Which is why reliability is important. I was elected in parliament the first time in 1998. So many years have passed since then. Let me tell you, from 1998 until 2015, even I was actively involved in politics. I would have difficulties thinking of the name of one Russian ambassador in this period. They were not interested, they were not present, politically present, they were not visible, they were not active. Even during our internal conflict in 2001, I cannot recall really strong any statements. This has changed starting from 2015, when we have had a political crisis, and this was the first time that actually we have started seeing a completely different behavior. And this is the new reality that we find ourselves in. We have seen that geopolitics in the Balkans, usually these days, does not present itself as geopolitics, but very frequently it puts the clothes of nationalism and populism. Probably this is very much the case in North Macedonia, because from a geopolitical point of view, there were never doubts in the Macedonian society. The westward orientation was strong since the beginning until now. But if you want to influence, if you want to shift the country in a different geopolitical circle, geopolitical orientation, probably the smart thing would not be to challenge this orientation per se.
Yes.
But actually to cover all the discussions and all the dilemmas and all the vulnerabilities in nationalism and populism. What has the West done for you? What has the EU done for you? Have they been true to their words? And these are the vulnerabilities that actually affect Macedonian society these days. And I think that these are the only source of geopolitical concern when it comes to North Macedonia, but even generally throughout the Western Balkans, with one or two exceptions.
Yes, and let's hope that this ring the red alarm bells for the EU to step up to its commitments. For the last 5 minutes or so of our exchange, we have a number of questions. I would like to allow the hands that have been raised to intervene, and then from the questions that I see in writing, I will just pose you half of two of the questions, because I think you mostly addressed the rest. So we have one written question about North Macedonia's expectations for the upcoming NATO summit, and another and this comes from Yonena Cholan. And another half question regarding the role of cultural matters in the accession negotiations. And now I will allow first Tanya Milevska, who has put her hand up to pose you the question in direct.
Yes, hi, do you hear me? I don't know if the camera is working.
We hear you. Go ahead, Tanya.
But you hear me. Okay, perfect. Yes. Tanya Milevska from the Macedonian News Agency. Hi, hello, Minister. I do have a few questions. The first one is regarding the upcoming General Affairs Council, obviously. Do you honestly and firmly believe that this that there will be a positive decision in terms of adopting the negotiations framework and the IGC, or it would be better to stop raising hopes given the situation in Bulgaria? And my second question is a more general one regarding the European Union and the state of the European Union today, the state of foreign policy in the European Union today when it comes to vetoing and blocking, the state of certain member states of the European Union, like Hungary, like Poland. Do you believe that maybe the drop in support among the pro-European Macedonians has also to do with that? And is this the kind of European Union that we still want to join? And my third question is a feminist one and a more personal one. You have been facing all sorts of obstacles in your career as a woman in politics. Do you believe that you have done enough in terms of feminist agenda since you've been in politics? And could you do more in terms of cyber harassment against the women and cyber violence?
Thank you so much, Tanya Milevska. Andrea De Munde, do you want to intervene now?
Me?
No, we have one more question from Andre. Andre, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Corina. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes. Good morning, Minister, and thank you for your analysis. Most of it I fully share. I mean, on the credibility issue, we have a huge credibility problem, not only related to Bulgaria, North Macedonia, and what is happening now, also visa liberalization for Kosovo, which is a shame. And I would also include the whole vaccination, let me say, saga, and the EU visiting the region and handing out symbolic, I would even say ridiculous quantities of doses, expecting from you that you say, thank you very much. I mean, taking pride in a scheme of 650,000 vaccines for a population in the region of, by and large, 18 million people spread over 4 months. I don't think this is a flattering picture for us in the EU, even if we have been very strong in providing equipment and that we are active in funding, etc. Even if the economic and investment plan still has to materialize, it is still very much nice words on paper with very vague wording in terms of conditionality, but that's just an observation. And by the way, when people say North Macedonia has been in the waiting room for opening accession negotiations for almost 16 years now, yes, I always make the link with Turkey, and I say even Turkey, and this is not anything negative on Turkey, but I say even Turkey because we know now how problematic it is, and the accession negotiations are de facto frozen. Even Turkey had to wait inverted commas, only inverted commas, 6 years, and you are heading for your full 16th year, which is an absolute disgrace. My actual question is on France. We know that the German presidency made a lot of efforts in trying to unblock the situation between Bulgaria and North Macedonia. I personally found that France was maybe conveniently hiding behind several backs of EU member states. It was quite invisible, which is all the more disappointing, I think, because it was France that had been pushing for the revised methodology. And a concluding remark, if the political steer, the increased political steer that is being promoted as one of the main advantages of the revised methodology ushers in what we see that is going on between Bulgaria and North Macedonia, then I think this could in itself seal the fate of the revised methodology. If that is the way the political steer is defined, the only solution I see is qualified majority voting on most of the stages in accession. Sorry for being so long.
No, thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you to all of those who posed questions. Minister, I come for a last time to you. Please feel free to cherry pick among all these questions for the end of our meeting.
Well, thank you very much. Very interesting and very wide. But I won't repeat my initial comments. Do I honestly and firmly believe? Of course, no, especially with such a strong statement. I honestly and firmly believe that we should continue trying without putting all our eggs in one basket. So I fully agree with Tanya that when it comes to the June summit, we shouldn't raise the expectations. If there is a breakthrough, you know, it would be great if we could surprise everyone, but it is very difficult to expect that a technical government can perform where a political government has actually failed the last time because of political considerations and because of elections. Now we have both a technical government and elections in Bulgaria. What I think is important is that the pressure needs to continue. The pressure from within and the pressure from the outside. I said, a decision will not be made because of pressure. But if there is no sense of urgency that we need to tackle the issue, we will all get used to the status quo and we will all get used to yet another frozen conflict. On whether we will join the union based on our hopes for what it should be, or based on the reality, after living so many years, both of us in North Macedonia, and after my career in politics, I have absolutely no excuse to be naive. And I don't see the European Union as the promise of perfection. If you study history, you will see that there is no single entity, empire, republic that has been born in perfection and ended in perfection. It would never end if it was a perfection. It's something that improves, stagnates, and sometimes enters a crisis. How you deal with the problems during the crisis defines your chances of success. I think that part of the reason for the crisis of within the European Union is this crisis of confidence. We talk about our confidence in the European Union. People from the Balkans are additionally shocked when they see this crisis. It's actually a combination of arrogance, but in the same time, crisis of confidence of the Europeans for the European Union. And I think it's a huge political challenge, especially for the elected officials. So I think that there are critical choices. I do believe firmly that the key element of the European architecture has to be a value-based society. And these values are the values that we saw lost: freedom of speech, free media, rule of law, independence of certain institutions, etc. We saw what happens when you lose them. The attraction of stabilocracy has been false. And I do believe that the European Union many years ago said that they will deal with the fundamentals first. I think that was one of the strategic and important decisions. And I do believe that based on this analysis, North Macedonia ranks rather high. On the personal question of the feminist agenda, because it's a personal question, I'll answer it very, very personally. I'm a person that is both impatient and hardworking. And when I say impatient, I mean that I keep also raising the bar constantly. So I'm constantly dissatisfied with something not being enough. And but in the same time, I do believe that we have come a long way. I was elected for the first time in a party structure, because partisan structures are very important. And I think that many people outside of the political parties underestimate the importance of a good political life, debate, and the importance of having strong parties. I was elected in the political party as being one of two women in a group of 30, let's say. When I compare this with my family, my party family now, with 50% of women, wow. Is this enough? No. We have very few mayors. We still have underrepresented women in government, and especially in executive positions. But the parliament is completely different, because we have introduced quotas. I'm personally now, I say, very proud of the quota system in our parliament and local councils, because I have participated in many debates on candidates, and I know that most of them would have ended in status quo of 5%, 10%, if it was not for the quota. And the second thing that I am proud of, but I do believe that we should do more, is opening doors and endorsing women candidates, because this is what I find one of the big criticisms, which very frequently is unfounded. You know, this story about women not supporting women. Bull, ... right? Of course, there are cases like this, but overwhelmingly, I have seen a lot of women supporting me, and I have participated while a group of us was supporting women. Cyber harassment is a huge problem, and I know Tanya has been a victim. I very often don't consider myself a victim of this, because I stopped reading comments. I know that it's not the instrument to solve cyber harassment. And according to all the assessments, this is one of the key reasons why it's difficult to convince women to enter the political arena, because it's really an arena, and because you're the lonely gladiator in the arena. So I do believe that we should have stricter, it's generally the need for regulation in social media, and especially some more direct instruments for cyber harassments that are especially important for women. I have learned to stop reading, and I have learned to develop a very thick skin when it comes to this. It's not an isolation from the world, but at least it allows me to work. Otherwise, it's really a blocking. Andre, thank you very much for the many comments. I fully agree with you that the issue that I didn't refer to, and this is visa liberalization for Kosovo, is the typical no-brainer that the EU still avoids to address. And I say it's a no-brainer because everyone in Kosovo who has even a remote idea of going into the European Union already has a second passport. It can either be an Albanian or Macedonian passport. So the lack of visa liberalization is actually not working for anyone. And I fully agree with you. This is something that should have happened. I won't discuss vaccination because it has been a major blow to us as a government as well. We have put too much hope in the system, in COVAX, in EU solidarity. On the other side, when I'm asked this within our own media landscape, within our society, I try to go to Monty Python. What have the Romans done for us? Well, they have done a lot. They have failed on the vaccines. So, and probably we have to understand this through the lenses of a generally weak action on behalf of the European Union to ensure vaccines even for the population. With regards to France, I believe that we should have done a bit more in the past. I think generally France is not present in the region in terms of investment, especially, and it was present politically in the 90s during the conflicts. But then afterwards, it more or less disappeared. And I do believe that it's a strategic mistake on the side of France, but it's also a strategic mistake on our part, especially North Macedonia. There were times when we didn't have a good or at all an ambassador in Paris. We were not proactive. It's difficult for a small country to be diplomatically active in Paris. I fully understand this, but we should have pushed a bit more. I do believe that now in the next few days, we will have some signals that things are improving, but I fully agree with you because the new methodology was the French invention, the French success. I do believe that now they will have more stakes to guard and develop their own investment in a way, because the failure to start accession talks is a failure of the new methodology. What could be the success of the new methodology when there is no implementation whatsoever? Of course, as someone who has depended on majority for many years, I see the benefits of this new discussion about a qualified majority instead of a full consensus. You know why? Because once a country or an individual understands the strength of the one voice, the one vote, there is a tendency to abuse it. If we need to ensure a certain kind of minority, substantial minority, then we enter the realm of, doing give and takes, making compromises, and then, you block something only when it really hurts you and when it's not just the simple instrument that you can use whenever you politically need to create a problem. I do believe, unfortunately, that we cannot count on a change of the majority in order to start accession talks. Otherwise, we'll probably have an extra 16 years. But even as a country that wants to see itself as the future EU member, I would prefer to live in a setting where no single country and no single individual is so powerful to block everyone else from acting.
And on that very powerful message, I want to thank you so much for your time and for this very open and interesting exchange. And also, of course, to our participants for sticking with us. Thank you very much. I wish you good luck with the work that lies ahead, and I look forward to another occasion to speak to you. It was an absolute pleasure, Minister. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Corina, and thank you very much for everyone who has participated. Bye. Stay safe.